Alright, what's up my friends? Welcome to my complete set review for All Will Be One. Clearly the audience has been Phyrexionized already because that's why they're clapping. I mean, it's a pretty scary set. Obviously our heroes are getting completed. Things are going crazy, but that's okay. We're doing our total set review here. Every card, constructed, limited. Did white, did blue. If you missed those, go watch them on YouTube, of course. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. In general, as always, leave your comments. Let me know you're wrong about all the cards, whatever, and let me know that I'm wrong about all the cards and whatever. We'll be wrong about everything together, which is kind of cool. I want to remind you before we start, 10 New Brews is going to be on the 2nd, February 2nd, which is a lot of fun. 10 New Brews, probably my favorite piece of content that I do. That'll be on the 2nd of February. And then, of course, we have the Paladar pre-release coming up as well in the Discord. Free to play for subscribers and Discord members and YouTube members. Free to play with prizes, all the infos in the Discord. Check that out as well. Let's go. I mean, what better color for Phyrexia all beyond than black, right? The main Phyrexian color. So let's get right into the cards here. Starting off with Ambulatory Edifice. Again, this is the creepiest art in the set. The Metaphor A14 Phyrexian construct. When ETBs may pay 2 life. If you do, a creature gets -1/-1 end of turn. Good draft card, honestly. You know, just a 3/2 for 3 is fine. It's an artifact for some value, and you can kill things sometime as well. So, just solid draft card. Nothing exciting. Not a high pick. Just like a fine draft card. Fills out your deck. That's the thing. Annihilating Glare is next. I'm going for a sorcery. This is your pretty typical, 1 mana sack creature or artifact to kill something or pay a bunch of mana otherwise. So 5 mana sorcery. Kill an artifact or kill a creature or planeswalker. Sack an artifact or creature. Make it cost 1. A little worse than usual, honestly, because it's a sorcery. Costs 5 instead of 4, I think. I don't even know. It's the same card you've seen a million times. It's a fine draft card. Don't take it too high unless you're able to sacrifice things pretty consistently. Very good mites, obviously, for sure. But yeah, bonus winner variation number 412. Not playable constructed, and then an okay limited card. Anoint with Affliction. I almost said Affection. Bombin Common. I think this card is excellent. Excellent. 2 mana for an instant. Exile a creature if it has mana value 3 or less. If your opponent is corrupted, which is one of the most important mechanics in the set, means they have 3 or more poison counters. It's just a exile anything. So exile removal with no limitations at all. That's really, really good. Because the front side of this is a card that I don't think exists at this mana cost. We've seen exile a creature with like mana value 3 or more for 2 mana at sorcery speed. We've seen a 3 mana version of this card. This is the most efficient version of the exile a cheap creature removal spell, which can be very important for other formats, old growth troll and various things you want to exile. And then, so I think the card's playable almost by itself without any poison counters at all. And then if you are corrupting, this is just the best Doomblade in the format, not even close. So, excellent card. Constructed as well as limited. In limited, this card's going to be phenomenal. It's already good. And then I think in limited, your primary goal is going to be to get your opponent corrupted with your poison counters. But yeah, definitely a really, really good card. Not much to say. This card is really, really good. We'll see play in multiple formats. Great draft card, of course, as the Bombin Common. Card's excellent. Card's very, very good. Archfiend of the Dross.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. This card happens a lot, folks. The 6/6 flyer for 4 with drawbacks. It doesn't have trample. It's got flying. ETBs have 4 oil counters. But if your upkeep, remove an oil counter from Archfiend of the Dross. Then if it has no oil counters on it, you lose the game. Whenever a creature your opponent controls dies, it loses 2 life. That's fine, honestly. So the card really isn't that bad. But it's got some issues. Issues being that it has the exact same skill set as 2 cards in the same color at the same mana cost. So for decks that can't kill it directly, for decks that are relying on damage-based removal or relying on combat to try and kill this, it's a nightmare, right? Red decks, green decks. However, so is Phyrexian Obliterator. And Oldrids also in the equation too is a similar thing. Good against red decks, good against green decks. So while this card isn't really terrible, I think the biggest concern with this card is that it just outclassed by 2 other cards in the same color and the same weight class. And it's also weak against the same things those cards are weak to as well. So if your opponent's playing exiling removal spells, actual like Infernal Grasp effects, bounce spells, this card kind of sucks. So I think this card, if Obliterator and Shielded were not in the format, I think this card could be a player, given its sizing. It's a pretty risky card without ways to proliferate and stuff like that, but it is pretty powerful. But because of that, the combination of I think the card's only okay, alongside the fact it's competing at a mana cost that's very, very competitive, makes this card probably unplayable in Standard. It does have the ability where like you can play this and like kill a bunch of their stuff and like Meta Massacre effect, but that requires multiple things also too. So I think the card's okay, but ultimately unexciting. I think it is a card that's scary but fine and limited for sure. But I constructed this card's, I just think not there. I think if people are going to try this card, it's just not really going to work. And you're much better off playing Shoulder for the most part. And then maybe Obliterator in the spots where Obliterator is good. This card's also, in the spots where this card is good, Obliterator is also good. So there you go. That's my trap card, Archfiend of the Duress. Again, in limited, it's mostly good in limited, but it is kind of scary because it can put you in a spot where you can lose when you would definitely win, which is not cool either. So, Bilious Skull Dweller, 1 black for a Phyrexian Insect Death Touch Toxic 1/1. Phenomenal card in limited. Absolutely phenomenal. I think a 1 mana 1/1 Toxic 1 is pretty solid because you'll almost always get that first counter in, which is great. And then the fact that a 1/1 Death Touch for 1 is already good in limited makes this card phenomenal. Excellent limited card. Excellent at getting your opponent to the clutch 3 poison counters. Blocks really well. Just like bread and butter, perfect limited card. Super great. Super great. Constructed, probably not, but not out of the question, I don't think, honestly, because having a 1-drop of Toxic is pretty good. Black Sun's Twilight. That's some cool art, I gotta say. It's pretty cool art. Black and X, instant. Up to 1 target creature gets -X on the turn. If X is 5 or more, return a creature card with mana value X less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Just very, very inefficient. This is 3 mana for a Disfigure, and Disfigure is not really playable by itself. If you do cast this for 5, kill a creature and return a creature, that is pretty good. But in Constructed, it doesn't really work. It's just too inefficient. In Limited, slam dunk. Slam dunk. Removal spell limited. Splashable. Card advantage. Can scale up. Can kill anything. Really, really good limit card limited for sure. But in Constructed, I think this card is just too expensive. If there's if like the way sizing works in the format, if you're playing a deck with like a lot of important 2 and 3 drops, and like the creatures you're trying to kill have like 2 or 3 toughness, even then, it's not really good enough, I don't think. So, not very exciting. But yeah, phenomenal draft card. Not really there in limited, in constructed, but really cool art too. Blight Belly Rat. No Bombin Common, but very good. 2 mana 4, 2/2 Toxic 1. Whenever it dies, proliferate. Bread and butter common. Great 2-drop, 2/2 for 2, toxic. And then later in the game, when this dies, proliferating can have some major value as another counter or 2. Pumps your oil counters up. Just super, super solid draft common. Not much more to say. Very, very good. Bone Picker Scourge, the Metaphor A14 flyer. As long as your opponent is corrupted, has Death Touch and Lifelink. 2 very, very good abilities for a 2/2 flyer for 3. This is the kind of card where it's fillery until it's good, and even then it's not great. So it's fine. I think if you're playing a deck with a lot of poison in it, this card is definitely reasonable. But as it stands by itself, the floor is pretty low as a Windrake, but pretty good. Again, put it in your infect decks. Don't put it in your non-infect decks. Simple as that. Chittering Skitterling, the Metaphor A14. This is a creature with no abilities until you have corrupted. But then once you do, sacrifice an artifact or creature and draw a card. Only do this once a turn. Pretty good. The fact that you can have this in play. Sacrifice your mites and draw cards. It's kind of cool. When things are going to die, you can draw a card. This is definitely no Morbid Overseer or Morbid Opportunist or whatever. It's not nearly as good as cards like that. And it requires you to have Corrupted to even do anything. I think if this card had Toxic 1, it'd be a lot better by itself. But it's kind of an okay card. And then again, it's the kind of card where if you have a lot of mites, you need to make this card work. It's not going to be good enough by itself, but if it works well in your deck, it can be a piece for sure. But it does ask a lot of you. You need to have both toxic creatures turn it on, and then fodder to sacrifice, which is the deal. So it's a middling uncommon. You can draw once in your turn, once your opponent's turn, yes. Cruel Grimark. This card was actually pretty close to Bombin Common for me. It's obviously not as good as the removal spell is, but this card's pretty damn good. 5 mana for a 5/5 Death Touch. Whenever it ETBs, each opponent discards a card. If they can't and their hand is empty, you gain 4 life. So, Ravenous Rat type effects typically aren't very good. You play it on turn 2 or turn 3, and they discard whatever cards bad in their hand, and they go on with their life. But a lot of times when you cast this card, they're only going to have 1 card left, and that card is going to be either a curve topper or a removal spell, which is very, very good. The body's good enough. And then when they're empty-handed, this is a Honey Mammoth, which is also a solid common too. So this is not a card you're taking highly. This is not a card you're playing a ton of. But if you're looking for a good curve topper, this card's super solid. I think this card's definitely a very solid curve topper for sure. A card you should be aware of also when you're playing limited format about playing against too. So if you're holding your 6th land and a 6-drop and you play a 5-drop or you play something else or whatever, maybe hold that extra land. Hold that extra card in hand so you don't get nailed by this thing on turn 6. But great limited card, I think. Again, you can't play that many of this card because you could only have 2 or 3 6-drops in your deck, but it's a very good 6-drop. Kind of similar to Honey Mammoth, like it a lot. Cutthroat Centurion. Is that Kylo Ren? Metaphor A14 artifact creature. Nantuku Husk.
Look how they mess with my boy.
Second artifact creature, +2/+2, only once a turn. It's tough. Still a good card, obviously. Sacrifice your mites and other various crappy artifacts for a little extra value, which is kind of cool, but realistically, 2/2 for 3 is not great. I think this card is just kind of okay. I think if you're making a lot of mites and you're utilizing it, you have to make this card good. It's not good by itself, kind of thing. But yeah, pretty big bummer that you can't sacrifice more than once. What are you gonna do? Durvenod, Carnage Dominus. This is the Black Dominus. This one costs 5, not 4. It is a legendary creature. It's an 8/3. Pretty strange sizing. If a creature dying causes an ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers again, so it doubles up your death triggers. Pay Phyrexian, exile the cards from your graveyard, put a counter on it. So the good news here is this is by far the best the best indestructible counter ability we've seen so far on the Dominuses, where it does not cost mana, you can use it immediately, and having 3 cards in your graveyard is pretty easy as well. So this is going to be an 8/5 indestructible creature for 5 mana and 4 life a lot of the time, and that's really, really good. The trigger ability on it is pretty cool as well. 3 creature cards, sure. I missed that part. Sorry, 2 creature. It's not as easy as I thought, but still a lot easier than it would seem to be. Yeah, my bad. But all right, it's a little worse than I thought, but still reasonable. The fact that you can play it and use it immediately is a big deal. And if you do, an 8/3 indestructible is insane. It's super, super huge too. So that's pretty cool. And then the ability, again, triggers death stuff. It's kind of hard to build around because it's a 5-drop, but kind of cool. I don't know. It seems all right. I think if you build your deck in a manner where you can activate it immediately, it's good. If not, it's eh. Yeah, I don't know. And then a limited busted limited card. Should be pretty easy to activate it in limited, and then it'll completely dominate the game. So, sure. Drown and Ichor. This card's real good. Real good. 2 mana for sorcery. Creature gets -1/-4 end of turn, and then proliferate. Similar to the blue cards, adding a proliferate to a marginal effect. This is not a marginal effect. 2 mana for -4/-4 is actively good. It's obviously a sorcery, not an instant. So Grasp in Darkness is the typical card you compare it to. That costs black. And it's instant. So I would say that losing out on instant speed, but being easy to cast, is about a wash. And then proliferating is great too. So this card's excellent. It kills a lot of things. Top kill spell. Limited, absolute top pick. And constructed, I think it definitely has a chance, honestly. Proliferating is pretty good. The sizing is pretty good. The only weakness here, of course, is it can't hit planeswalkers. But otherwise, super solid card. Does not kill Shoulder, which is definitely an issue. And this is kind of the thing where that 5th toughness is very important in this format, I think. But it's still a very good card. First pick in limited, and then still a pretty reasonable constructed card. Duress. We all know what Duress does. No comment. Feed the Infection. 4 mana 4 sorcery. Draw 3, lose 3. If your opponent is corrupted, each opponent with 3 more poison counters loses 3 life also. These cards aren't great. You know, the ambitions cost. I feel like if the corrupted like made it so you gain 3 instead of losing 3, that would be insane. That would be like a really good payoff for this. But modern day Magic does not afford you the time to just like tap a bunch of lands and not affect the board. And then when you're losing life also, it's a huge tempo loss. So this card is pretty scary. You know, if you're playing a slower deck with lots of removal spells and you can afford to be defensive, this card's okay. Or if you're very, very aggressive and you are pretty sure your opponent will be on the back foot, this card's also okay. And obviously if you're aggressive, the 3 life loss is pretty good too. But yeah, I think that corrupted you gain life instead of lose it. Corrupted, it has flash, are all things that would make this card actively quite good. As it stands, this card is a limited kind of like okay filler card. Contextual to certain decks. Good if you're very aggressive, or good if you're very defensive. Not great in the middle, and definitely worse on the draw as well. Fleshless Gladiator, 2 mana for a 2/2. If you are corrupted, you can pay 3 mana to bring it back from your graveyard tapped, and you lose a life. That's pretty good, honestly. So it's 2/2 for 2. You don't mind trading, and then later in the game it comes back, which is awesome. The fact that it doesn't have toxic itself is kind of tough because it's not a card that helps turn itself on. But solid two drop for sure. Losing 1 life is totally fine. It's instant speed of activation. Card solid. This is the kind of card where you don't want 4 of this card because there are major diminishing returns on it. You can't return that many of them, nor can you return them that many times over the course of the game. But the first copy is going to be great, I think. And if you can discard it, that's also awesome. But trading it off is pretty good too. So it's cool. Geth Thane of Contracts. Black 1, 3/4. Other creatures you control get -1/-1. So pretty damn big drawback. Black 1, tap to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains, if a creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate only as a sorcery. So we have a card here that can zombify on turn 4, which is pretty cool. There are some big creatures in standard, right? Is Toxtrol still legal? I don't remember. What's that Toxtrol's in? I don't think so, but still, return big things. The reality is, though, this is a sorcery speed activation. This is a card that you don't want to play with other creatures. Therefore, your opponent's kill spells are going to be able to target it pretty directly, where like they're not going to be killing other stuff, they got to kill this. So both those are pretty heavy counts against it, but the body sizing is reasonable. It is a pretty powerful effect. There are things like Titan of Industry, Toxtrol, that is legal apparently, and other cards you can bring back with it. Kind of a cool card, honestly. I can see this card making it. A 3/4 for 3 is reasonable also. Again, the drawback is real. -1 is a lot, but it's kind of a cool card. In limited, this card's weird because the drawback is so monumental. In limited, you probably just can't play this card, honestly. But yeah, I don't know. Cool card. Gulping Scrap Trap. We should get a top 5 fun names to say in this set. Because there are a lot of fun names to say. I'm just going to say it again. Gulping Scrap Trap. Here we go. Ready?
Gentlemen, behold!
Gulping Scrap Trap. 5 mana for a common 4/4. When it ETPs or dies, proliferate. Seems fine. Not great, honestly. The sizing is pretty bad. A 4/4 for 5 is definitely not good. And then proliferate needs to be really, really good here, I think, to make this card reasonable. Just kind of like filler 5-drop. Cool name, though. Cool art. But, Infectious Inquiry. The Metaphor A sorcery. Draw 2, lose 2. Each opponent gains a poison counter. Similar problem to the last card that drew cards, right? Where if you're taking a turn off, draw cards, lose life, it's a tempo black hole. This was a little better because it costs 3 instead of 2, obviously. Sorry, 3 instead of 4. And giving your opponent a poison counter is definitely reasonable, but not a very exciting card. I think that like if you're like blue-black, and you're proliferating and playing kind of like a blue-black control proliferate shell, this could help you get that first counter, which is kind of cool. But all in all, not very exciting. I don't really love the read the bone effects that much in limited. They're very bad at a draw, and you just die a lot. Basically, you just like don't play a 3-drop. They do. They attack you for a bunch. They untap. You try and stabilize. They kill your thing and just kill you. So I don't love it. And then constructed, obviously not. Kermonix the Rat King. Black 1 rare 3/3 toxic 1. Other rats have toxic 1. When it ETBs, look at the top 5 cards of your library. Reveal any number of rat cards and put them into your hand. The rest go on the bottom. Goblin Ringleader for rats. That's fun. You can damn well know I'll be playing this card on stream for sure. Because honestly, this card's very powerful. This is Ringleader is a 4-mana 2/2 that looks at 4 cards. This is a 3-mana 3/3 that looks at 5 cards. Oh, so this card is actually obscenely powerful. It's just contextual to like, are there playable rats or not? But definitely a super cool card. In standard, I mean, there probably aren't enough rats. I have not been checking rat creature types. But I do think that this could potentially see play in other formats if there are enough playable rats. There probably aren't, but the power level's there. This card is a very, very powerful card. Just need some friends. And then limited, this card's great. There's a high chance you'll draw 1 card of this in limited, which is phenomenal. And even if you don't, it's still reasonably priced as well. So great limited card. And then constructed, if you got the rats, pretty awesome. Very, very fun design. Love it. Necrogen Communion. 2 mana for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control. Enchant creature has toxic 2. And then whenever it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control. This is the kind of aura that like doesn't really do enough and risks getting blown out by a removal spell or a bounce spell or whatever. It's good on ETB effects, which is kind of cool, so you can reuse them. Not a very exciting card. I almost would prefer if this card was like an instant that like, you know, gave it toxic to it on a turn, and then if it died, came back. So it can be like it can be a trick. But there are, of course, exiling kill spells that get around this, bounce spells that get around this. Just not a very good card, I don't think. You know, you can like play a 1-drop with toxic 1 and then play this on it and immediately corrupt on turn 2. But I think that ceiling is not worth the floor here, which is pretty low. So not very exciting. Necrosquito. Somebody give their naming department a raise, all right? Necrosquito. 4 mana for a 0/0 flyer. EDBs with 2 oil counters on it. Gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put to a graveyard on the battlefield, put an oil counter on it. This card's pretty good. So obviously it's 2/2 flyer for 4, which is not great. This card has the typical problem in limited of being a card that you can play on turn 4 but can't block very well. But once you untap with this, that's pretty good. Things die, put counters on it. You can proliferate, put counters on it. So this is the kind of card where it's very bad the turn you cast it. It's actually really, really bad. But once you untap with it, it can win the game by itself. So you need to ask yourself, if you are a deck that can handle tapping out for this, surviving the turn to untap, you're good to go. But if you're going to fall behind and then try and play this card, you're going to fall further behind and probably lose. So definitely a pretty good limited card, though. Just make sure your deck is built in a manner you can utilize it. This card will win you a lot of games. Nimrazor Paladin. 5 mana for a creature, Phyrexian Knight, toxic 2, 4/4. Whenever it ETBs, return a creature card, mana value 3 from your graveyard to your hand. Top flight, limited card. A 4/4 Gravedigger for 5 with toxic 2 is phenomenal. Splashable, excellent limited card. Offer Immortality. 2 mana for an instant. Creature gets Death Touch and indestructible done in turn. This is your typical like bad combat trick. I mean, it works. You can play it. It's not great. If this card costs 1, sign me up. At 2 mana, it's very clunky. It is good with the toxic cards because your opponent's going to block more often than they might normally, and this punishes that. But, you know, decent on offense, bad on defense, can make it blown out. It's just okay. I think I'm not super excited about this card. It's obviously fine, but I would not want to play too many copies of this card, nor do I want to take it highly. Pestilentsiphoner. Man, if you hate mosquitoes, this is not the set for you. Holy moly. Woo!
Would it help if I got out and pushed?
2 mana for a 1/1 flying toxic 1. This is going to be like your linchpin common. You know, your black decks want to get your opponent corrupted. This card does that, and does it on a cheap. Good common. There you go. That's it. Phyrexian Arena. God, I love Phyrexian Arena. I'm going to build so many Phyrexian Arena decks in Standard. This card is definitely not as good as it used to be. Because back in the day, threats kind of sucked. So you could afford to just like tap out for this, then just kill everything the rest of the game. Now your opponent might play a 4/4 on turn 3, or even worse, Shieldred. Shieldred's pretty good against this card, although this card is also good with Shieldred. Spoiler alert, Shieldred's pretty good. But definitely a cool card. I'm happy to see back. It probably won't have too much of an impact on Standard. I think it will see probably Fringe play. I do love this card, and I'll play it a lot. And then Limited, this card's obviously phenomenal. But yeah, I as a boomer, I just can't say anything bad about Phyrexia Arena. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. Phyrexia Obliterator. You've been over this already. Phyrexia Obliterator is a very polarizing card. I think this card's very overrated. It is obscenely good in some spots, and then it is very, very bad at other spots. And it is also directly competing in the mana slot with Shieldred, which is not a good place to be because Shieldred's probably one of the best 4-mana block creatures of all time, if not the best 4-mana block creature of all time. So your opponent's playing red, they're playing green, they're trying to beat down, this card will destroy them. Otherwise, this card is pretty bad. So definitely a sideboard card if you have a mono block deck, you're trying to beat red-green aggro or something like that, because your opponent won't be able to beat it, but it is definitely not very good otherwise. So very polarizing card, very hard to cast. When you do cast it, and it is good, it'll win your game by itself. But a lot of time you'll cast it, and they'll just kill it and just laugh at you. So, there you go. In Limited, this card's busted, but obviously very hard to cast. So, if your draft deck can cast it, cool. Go for it. Win the match. Have a great time. I think I would want to play at least 11 or 12 swamps before I cast this card. I think even if you're casting this say you have 2 forests and 4 swamps in play, it's still really good in Limited. But just be aware you can't play this in your 9-8 mana base or whatever. But yeah, very polarizing card. We know what this card does. We've seen it in Standard before and stuff like that. So, Ravenous Necro Titan. Full Metaphor A14. Woo, boy.
Good lord. Gigantism.
No abilities unless your opponent is corrupted. And if your opponent is corrupted, I'm sorry, it's the opposite. Whenever it ETBs, sacrifice a creature unless your opponent is corrupted. So this card's pretty good because if you're able to sacrifice a Might or some random shitter, a 6/6 for 4 is obviously phenomenal Limited. And then if you are corrupting them, it's 6/6 for 4, which is insane. So they have very, very good card if you're either corrupting your opponent or you're playing Mights and tokens or whatever. It's pretty cool too. So good draft card. You gotta put a little work in, but you get paid off for sure. Scheming Aspirant, 2 mana for a 1/3. Whenever you proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This might as well be a blue-black card, honestly, because this card's going to be insane in the blue-black draft decks. Almost every blue spell it says proliferate is kind of on it anyway. So making it so whenever you cast a spell, you drain for 2, it's insane. So this is a really, really good uncommon for Limited, for blue-black especially. Constructed, no, but Limited, phenomenal. Shieldred's Edict. Listen, folks. Or don't listen, whatever. This is the best Edict ever printed by such a wide margin, it's not even close. Edict effects are, borderline to not that playable these days. 2 mana, the sack creature. The biggest weaknesses they have are they're bad against tokens, they're bad against planeswalkers. This does it all. So if your opponent has 2 Mights in play and a good creature, sack the big creature. Your opponent has a Martlage in play.
Get off my plate.
And then most importantly, the part that makes this card so good is that this is the cleanest Planeswalker removal possibly ever printed. It's unlikely your opponent's going to have more than 1 Planeswalker in play. So this is just 2 mana Hero's Downfall a lot of the time too. This card is phenomenal. It's going to see play in literally every format. This card is unbelievable. It's very, very good. It's honestly probably a little worse in Standard, where there are decks playing, multiple creatures that aren't tokens, so on and so forth. But still good there as well. And then, of course, it has all the upsides of Edicts, where it's good against Hexproof, good against things like Bonecrusher Giant. The card's phenomenal. Slam dunk constructed card. 10 years from now, this is going to be one of the cards you remember the set for, because it'll still be played for sure. So, card's great. And then Limited, the cards, it's honestly a little worse in Limited, because there are no Planeswalkers. and the edict isn't as good. So in limited, it's just like fine, but constructive, this card is absolutely phenomenal. Best in show, not even close. Sheoldred's Edict. Sheoldred's Head Cleaver, a little less exciting. 4 mana for a 2/4 Menace, Toxic 2. Not a bad card. The problem here is that Menace on a 2/4 isn't very exciting because you can pretty easily double block a 2/4 and only lose one creature. So the Menace here is good if they have like a 4/4 in play and nothing else, but honestly not going to be evasion as much as you want it to. And the Toxic 2 is cool and all, but a 2/4 for 4 isn't particularly great. So mostly just a pretty unexciting card. I think that if you are good at killing your opponent's creatures and keeping the board semi-clear, that this card is a little more reasonable because the Menace will actually matter. But in a lot of games, the Menace won't matter at all, making this card kind of eh. So, filler level draft card. Stinging Hive Master. 3 mana for a 3/2 Toxic 1 common. When it dies, make a might. Bread and butter limited card. Just very, very good. You know, 3/2 Toxic 1 for 3 is fine. Getting value when it dies is great. And as you've seen so far, there are a lot of sacrifice effects in black, making the might very useful as well. Very, very solid limited card. Testament Bearer. This card's also a very solid limited card. We have 4 mana for a 4/1, so not a very good rate. However, when it dies, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. Putting this in a similar scope to a card like Organ Hoarder, things like that, where don't get the card up front immediately, but this can trade up with like 4 and 5 drops on defense, which is pretty great. And then it's important to note, of course, that the mites, the tokens in this set, don't block. So normally this card would be pretty rough against, random woman soldier tokens, yada, 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 saproling tokens. But there's not a lot of that in this format. So even if you attack and trade with a 2/2 or a 3/3, you're still getting the card of value, which is great. It's going to be a good spell most of the time. Maybe some graveyard value also. And then obviously great on defense too. Very, very solid card. Good 2/1. You can sacrifice it for value if you want to. You don't really want to sacrifice a 4-drop for value typically. But just get in combat with this card. Get in combat, make a trade, be up a card, and be happy about it. That Emergence. 5 mana for a Zombify that proliferates. Not very good. I don't think proliferate is worth 5 mana Zombify. It's not really good constructed or limited. It's like attack, proliferate onto a bad card, still a pretty bad card. That Rebirth. 1 mana black artifact. Whenever an artifact creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on it. 3 mana tap, remove 4 oil counters, and return a creature card to the battlefield as a sorcery. So, a lot needs to happen for this card to be good. It can gain oil counters fairly easily, where things are going to die. Obviously in constructive, you're playing like, Onicult Anvil or whatever. Pretty easy to like keep adding counters to this. The thing is that your payoff is Zombify, right? So Zombify costs 4 mana. This also costs 4 mana overall. I need to return a creature at sorcery speed. So is your deck that is trying to assemble an engine that is able to, get this sacrifice thing going and put counters on this, also going to want to reanimate a creature too? That's a lot of moving parts. So now we need to get a big creature in the graveyard. We need to get things in play that die. This thing in play, successfully activate. It's just like a lot of stuff to do. And I don't think it's really worth the squeeze. And that's not even accounting for the fact that there's a lot of graveyard hate in standard. Graveyard Trespasser, Corpse Appraiser, and so on and so forth. So overall, I think this card's kind of bad. The kind of card where the juice ain't worth the squeeze kind of thing. In limited, if your deck's like really slow, making a lot of mites, sure. Triggers off your opponent's stuff, sure. No, it's you control. It's not opponent stuff. Don't chat. Come on. This is why I look at chat during these things. But yeah, very, very slow. Very slow value engine. It's not super exciting. Varan, Executioner Thane. We got our sleeper card, folks. This card's pretty good. 2 mana for a 2/2 legend, Phyrexian Vampire. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control die, each opponent loses 2 and you gain 2, but only once a turn. This card's good. So, unlike our last card, this card does give you good value when you have an engine going, right? So if I have an Onicult Anvil going every turn, I get to drain for 2 extra. If I've got a Jadar attacking tokens, if I'm just attacking, whatever, here's my creature, attack with it. Block and trade, great, take 2. That's great, honestly. And then we have, the thing is that the ability is really, really good. We also have a 2/2 for 2, which is also a reasonable value. Anyway, it's a vampire, it's a Phyrexian, and if you play a second copy, I believe that you drain for 4, right? Oh, I'm sorry, other creatures. So no, I'm sorry. So you only drain for 2, but still. So your redundant copies can be 2 mana drain 2, which is like not the worst, you know. So these cards great, honestly. Cards seem sweet, you know. And the thing is, when you look at effects like this, they're usually Blood Artist, Zillipore, Cutthroat, 0/1, 1/1s. The 2/2 for 2 is much better, and 2's a lot of life also. So I think this card's great. It's gonna be very, very sneaky. Very good card. I like it a lot. Obviously, phenomenal limited card, but yeah, definitely a really, really cool card. I think this card's a lot better than it looks, hence why it's our sleeper card. Varaska, Betrayal's Sting, our completed Planeswalker in black, which is a 6 mana or 5 mana plus 2 life to get a 6 or 4 loyalty Planeswalker. If you use Phyrexia mana, it only has 4 loyalty. 0 mana, effectively +1. I'm sorry, 0 mana. 0 loyalty, effectively +1. Draw a card, lose 1 life, proliferate. That's pretty good, actually. Then we have -2. Makes a creature into a treasure and loses all abilities and card types. So basically a removal spell that gives them a mana, which is pretty good, honestly. And then we have -9. If target player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. So it puts them right up to 9 poison counters. And it's important to note that if Varaska does not die, it will kill them next turn with proliferate, which is kind of cool. So this card's sweet, honestly. It's like your typical 5 mana Planeswalker. It can plus to draw cards. It can minus to kill things. Proliferating has extra value. Again, don't read that first ability as a 0. It's +1 because you proliferate this Planeswalker. In a Super Friends deck, this can proliferate your other Planeswalkers too, which is kind of cool. It's good. Honestly, it's a good card. I'm not sure exactly what deck wants this card. Some sort of Super Friends deck maybe. Proliferate kind of stuff. But again, drawing cards and killing things are universal. Most decks want that anyway. So, very solid card. I think this card's better than it looks for sure. Varaska, Betrayal Sting. Bomb and limited. Slam it. Don't even think about it. Super good. Varaska's Fall, however, is a 3 mana instant. Edict effect. Common. Shouldered Edict makes this card look like, you know, I don't even know. Some bad card. Listen, all right? So I'm trying my best. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or Planeswalker against a poison counter. Just not very good, honestly. 3 mana Edict, very bad. Don't play that card unless your opponent's playing a very small amount of creatures. However, this card's great. Whispers of a Dross. 1 black for an instant. -1 and proliferate. If this kills something, you're way ahead. And if you know me, you know I love 1 mana tricks. This is pretty good in combat. And then proliferate is pretty good also. Cool card. Definitely a little narrow. But you got to make sure that you're going to use this. So you're going to want to be able to either have it against decks that have X1s or be playing a deck with a lot of combat happening. So that you can, I have a 2/2, you have a 2/2, I attack, you shrink, and then proliferate. It's the kind of card where it's weird because you kind of want to play it later in the game, but it's so cheap. And then I think that it could see play constructed if there is a proliferate kind of deck kind of thing, because the efficiency is there for sure. It's not amazing, you know, but it's definitely a cool card with some utility, which is kind of nice. That's it, folks. It's it for black. So, to recap, best in show is Shoulder's Edict. Our sleeper card is Varan, Executioner Thane. Our trap card, Archfiend of the Dross. And our Bombin Common, Anoint with Affliction. That's black, folks. Leave a comment on YouTube. Let me know how right or wrong I am. And, of course, on Twitch, don't go nowhere. All right, we ain't done yet. Right is up next. YouTube folks, love you, like, comment, subscribe. Let's go.